Hello, I'm Kelly, aka Ratboar. I wanted to share my method of how I go about creating my custom palettes when I don't have all my eyeshadows depotted. You want a large file size because our final size is going to be 1080 by 1080 pixels. If your photos are larger than that, which they usually are, it'll be great for scaling down and not losing any quality. If your photo is too small, then when it gets scaled up, it'll be noticeable and pixely. If you're using an iPhone to take photos, you can adjust those settings under Camera. For programs, I'll be using Procreate, which is available on iPad. I've also done this in Clip Studio Paint as well as Photoshop. While the layouts of these apps are different, they all have the available tools necessary for this project. It isn't necessary to use an iPad, but I do recommend it, or a traditional tablet. It's doable on mouse and keyboard, but it is a bit more taxing on the body doing all those clicks. Tools we'll need to familiarize ourselves with is the lasso tool, the move tool, the brush, eraser, and clone tools. Keep in mind I'm not an expert, so any critiques or advice is highly appreciated. The lasso tool is what we use to select a specific area that we want to edit. There's a few different kinds of lasso shapes, but for this one we're going to use the rectangle shape since our eyeshadow pans are that shape. Actually, if we zoom in, I think you'll notice that our eyeshadow pans aren't a true square. They actually have rounded edges to them. Since the final size will be 1080 pixels on both sides, the super small details like that honestly don't matter too much. If you're doing super zoomed in shots, then it might stand out a bit. Plus, we're going to use the eraser tool to fix the shape a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is select the eyeshadow pan that we want to take using the lasso tool. I try to select the area that shows the line of the pan so that it looks more realistic when we place it in the palette. If you can't, that's okay too, it's just a small detail to add. As you can see, when I selected my eyeshadow, I still have some of the original palette left. That's okay because we're going to go in with the eraser tool and fix that bit. The box that is surrounding our eyeshadow pan is called a bounding box, and that basically just lets us resize what is selected as well as rotate the selected object. Now I'm using the eraser tool to smooth out and erase the extra bits of palette that are visible. I like to use a soft or medium airbrush since it's a little bit more forgiving than a hard edge brush will be. You don't have to go as ham as I'm going. I do find this process to be relaxing. And again, from far away, you can be a little messy with it since it's not going to be as noticeable as it would be up close. Now it's time to add shadows. It's super easy. I like to duplicate the layer, and then we're going to go to Adjustments under Hue, Saturation, and Brightness, and we're going to lower the brightness down to none. Depending on the lighting of the picture and the palette, I don't like to always leave the shadows black just because sometimes it's a little bit too harsh, and so I'll go in and mess with the opacity settings a little bit, but the shadows in this picture are pretty stark, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Now that I'm happy with the results, I can just basically rinse and repeat with other shadows. And I already have that done, so I just wanted to show the other colors that I picked for the palette. Now I'm going to show you the clone tool. This isn't a necessary step again, it's just something that kind of makes it look better because a couple of my eyeshadows have a sticker label showing, and so we're going to go in with the clone tool and kind of fix them out. And the best way to kind of explain the clone tool is that it basically just scooches over an area that you select. So you don't want your marker for the clone tool to be too far away from where you're fixing the image, if that makes sense. And when you have limited space, like here, you want to make sure that you're doing this in small movements and not doing super big sweeps. And then I'm just going to speed it up right here because it's a process. And I'm not that good at using the clone tool in Procreate, so I'm just going to use the brush to kind of edge out this shadow just to fix it a little bit more. And now I'm going to show another sped up showcase of the clone tool. It took me about 1 minute and 30 seconds to do this in real time. I want to show you one additional step that is optional. If you zoom in, you can actually see the slight reflections of some of the pans. I'm going to fake it using the brush tool and just draw on the reflections. Honestly, they don't look amazing, but it's passable. I didn't even think to use the clone tool here, which would have been perfect. I'm putting the highlight on a layer behind the eyeshadow pan because if we do it on a layer above, it will obstruct the eyeshadow. Make sure to use a lower opacity when drawing this because less is more. I don't really use this feature much, but I wanted to talk about it anyways. I would also not recommend having all these eyeshadows on the same layer, but for convenience sake they are. We can go back to Hue, Saturation, and Brightness section under Adjustments and change the colors of the eyeshadow. I don't like to do this because I prefer to only use eyeshadows that actually exist, but don't let that deter you from doing so. If everything is on one layer, you can actually use the lasso tool to select a single pan if you only want to change one of them. Now to save it. There's a bunch of different kinds of files to save it as. JPEG and PNG are the most common ways to save it. PNG can handle transparent backgrounds while JPEGs can't. JPEGs can reduce the file size to something more manageable if you're low on space. PNG will be a higher quality. What I have noticed affects the quality, however, is the DPI of a photo. DPI is dots per inch. 72 DPI is acceptable for web, but not for print. However, I have noticed weird pixely artifacts when I've posted pictures at a 72 DPI. So I personally save all my stuff at a 300 DPI, which again is not necessary, but I do think the dip in quality is there sometimes. Thank you for watching! I hope this tutorial was helpful in some way. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'd be happy to help in any way that I can.